This one's mine. I'll see you on the Great Barrier Reef as universe around us explodes and is transformed into the light. And if it lives, will we live too, do you suppose? I'll see you in the world beyond belief, the world where love and hope spring eternal, where in each moment passion is conceived and soars into sublime from the infernal. As non-existence struggles to deceive, will be the love's embodiment, sweet beauty, the life force rushing through us like a sieve and reaching to the stars, no more polluted. How much magnificence can you conceive? How much, as unison of soul and matter, thus love from our hearts will be retrieved and over all of humankind will scatter, there to impart the healing and relief, there to impart the wisdom and the kindness, there to impart the passion that can live the world that is exploding behind us, to alter all that has been misconceived, to reach into the core of every atom, to give and see to it that is received all that we see and all that we have fathomed. And if one dies and paralyzed with grief, the other were to dive into the ocean, we'll be there on the Great Barrier Reef, frozen in time, in passion and devotion. Thank you all.
I love porn. I don't have to think. You don't have to feel. You don't need a voice. You don't need faith. You don't need to act. I love porn. I don't need a script. I don't need to act. I don't need to feel. I love porn. Anesthesia. Anesthesia. I love porn. You don't have to think. You don't have to feel. You don't need a voice. You don't need to act. Anesthesia. Anesthesia. And you can be sure that there is no democracy in that place. Anesthesia. 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 I love Canberra. You don't have to think. You don't have to feel. You don't need a voice. You don't need faith. You don't need to act. How I love Canberra. Anesthesia. Anesthesia. I love Canberra. And you can be sure there is no democracy in that place. I love Canberra. I love Canberra. Anesthesia. I love Canberra. anesthesia. Thank you.
This is a recent poem. It's about Chris Hemmensley's bookshop. Eleanor Jackson asked a few people to write poems for something she's got for Overload this year about sites around the CBD of Melbourne. And my girlfriend wrote a poem, a really good poem about Jobs Warehouse, which you may or may not know, in Burke Street. And I was kind of like, what am I going to write about? So I just went mercantile as well and wrote one about Collected Works Bookshop. Late in the afternoon, he pulls a bottle of sherry from beneath the desk. Upstairs, the first floor of the Nicholas building, stained glass, brass and woodwork. Built on profits from the pain pill we call Aspro, back when World War cut off nations. But in the shop, it's mostly concrete beams, decorated with books, small books. He stands there with his rubicund south of England face. Occasionally, a small burr slips into his voice. We share a glass, a sip, another conversation. Occasionally, an actual customer comes in and buys an actual book. Unlike most shopkeepers, he doesn't encourage this. Not that he exactly refuses, but there's a sense, are you sure you want to buy this book? As though all good dogs deserve a home over the hills and far away. And I don't want to disturb you, good customer, in your dreaming. If I told you what I know, then perhaps you'd never leave. And I've got my journal to write in. Meanwhile, bills arrive and boxes of books from publishers not to be returned. This book's been here since 1988. All the deaths and all the launches condemned with faint applause. Late afternoon, he stands there, master of elliptic reminiscence. Would you perhaps like another glass? Cutting cheese with a paper knife. Thank you.
Before signals and symbols, before Labour or Liberal, before gadgets and gizmos, life was stable and simple. Before calories, before capillaries, before capacities and capabilities, before it mattered whether the roads are wet, before moisturiser, makeup and deodorant, before anthrax and trans fats and melanoma, before after midnight, before drunk or sober, before responsibilities that come with conditions, before we learnt all those words ending in ism, before we had patience, before climate changes, ages before empty praises and wages, before gay or straight, emo, punk, metal or goth, before we grew facial hair, let alone shaved it off, before we cared about children starving in Ethiopia, before acne, sinus, reflux and myopia, before PhDs, before VCE, before ATMs, BO and being PC, before cars and careers, religion and doubt, back when we thought welcomes didn't wear out, before we could drive and the drive to succeed, before dollars and hours and how many we need, before calculus, before sums were equations, before moderation, before compensation, before health insurance, bank accounts and investments, before we learnt it's not always best to ask questions, before we knew about Hitler, Stalin and Mao, when we'd seen people kissing, but before we knew how, before tears could be swallowed, before smiles could be hollow, before there was nuance to excitement and sorrow, before dating and diets and dissatisfaction, before factions and fractions and this season's fashion, before we could gossip, vote or paint up our eyes and stress about bald spots or cellulite thighs, before we knew heartbreak or carried a phone, before it ever occurred that one day we'd leave home. How we longed for adulthood and all its adventures before we knew childhood was so brief and so precious.
This is another recent poem which probably doesn't totally work, but you'll go with me, won't you, darlings? It's called Brunswick Street. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, is that the time? The tram tracks recede back behind me. The day is a repetition of nows. Now, 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 now. Day and night, depending on when you're sleeping. And the tram is full of partygoers who get on and get off, famously amused by drug dealers. And I'm connected by a long cord to the recharging machine, which may or may not be may or may not be heaven, depending on your definition. And famous asses wear famous trousers into shops stock full of stock. The choice is endless, though it all comes down to two legs bifurcated by a zip. The drug culture depends on lighters. Where there's smoke, there's people stonked. I don't know what time of day it is. The iPod is 80s synthesizers revisited and can't be argued with. Shiny toys don't have edges. Like eggs, they're perfect until cracked. The best omelettes are simple. Cool people have bad manners because they're afraid. More hairdressers than milk bars in this town now.
Part 9 of Paper Pupa. There we had to leave Kump, but only by a matter of cubits. It was time to reacquaint ourselves with Rose Trough. She held ribbons of metal that slowly bent and straightened themselves of their own volition. I'm sorry, I was not permitted to relate her activities before this. I protested and made a deal with the governing panel in return for limited access to Rose's doings. The word egret had to be the third word of every sentence. I fought egret, but my will was so much confetti against the will of the panel. So egret it was. Rose sauntered egret across this junction of, I'm sorry, feathers. The feathers, egret, were partially bent and indicated a great dome. No words, egret, had been inscribed here. Rose attempted, egret, to imagine the lathe that the dome had been turned upon. Such imaginings, egret, were counterproductive. Having an egret was stripped to one's writing was not as unfortunate as it could have been. It was, Egret, much better than being hurt. It was, Egret, a simple condition. There were, Egret, no hidden penalties, no things awaiting with venom. But at the end of that page, I say, there were no Egrets.
I wrote this poem around the time, it was my sister's birthday on Monday, and again I forgot it. And this poem is about forgetting my sister's birthday. Sister's birthday. Having gone to see My Year Without Sex, a self-consciously Australian movie, small family details, but at least a story arc, as the Americans say, written, directed by a woman. I noticed the husband didn't complain when there was no sex for a year, which made him a bit too nice, I thought, though, okay, she nearly died. Coming out of the theatre, remembered sister's birthday. Bought flowers and rillette to spread on bread, a French name for the potted meat Dad used to make, but a French name costs more. I try to remember my sister's birthday. The same day as Mum's. This year she would have been 96. So waxen she looked laid out on the hospital bed. Sister lives alone and has the sort of casual Catholic violence I detest. Try to forget. Drive to Armidale. A thunderstorm. Lights on, blinded by rain. Cars drive home. Visits of duty driven by a sort of love underneath. A perfect cup of tea. An event that only happens every couple of years. A confluence of milk, tea, sugar. She listens to talking books, doesn't watch TV. Eyes hurt too much. Insulted my girlfriend only in passing. Pauses between words. Women have powers men don't possess, though men are obvious bastards. I didn't have much of a headache by the time we left. I wish she didn't live alone. But I can't fix her life up. I can't fix my own. Don't like going back to where I was before. Live in the present, which is uneasy. My girlfriend and I had a stupid argument in the car. I was comparing the heroine in My Year Without Sex to Muriel in Muriel's Wedding. How they had the same daggy Australian woman thing. Not found elsewhere. She thought I was being insulting. My voice became more metallic, exasperated. You don't get it. Grinding on through changes of lights. She retreated to silence, like Mum used to do with Dad. I felt empty. She did too. Thank you.
Do they think that I do not know? He was in love, he was married, Lawson, and he was in love with a woman that was not his wife. And when he went overseas, unfortunately this woman died. and she was buried in a cemetery in Brighton. And when he wrote this song, the parents dug her up from the cemetery in Brighton and buried her somewhere else. No, it's not nice. But they didn't want the scandal of, you know, a married man being in love with their daughter. They say I've never written of love like a writer of songs should do. They say I could never touch the strings with a touch that is firm and true. They say I know nothing of women or men or the fields where love's roses grow. They say I must write with a halting pen. Do you think that I do not know? Well, my love burst came like an English spring in the days when our hair was brown, and the hem of a skirt was a sacred thing, and her hair was an angel's crown. The shock when another man touched her arm where the dancers sat in a row. The hope and despair and the false alarm. Do you think that I do not know? By the arbor lights of the western farms, you remember the questions put, while you held her warm in your quivering arms and trembled from head to foot. The electric shock from her fingertips, the murmuring answer so low, the soft, shy yielding of warm red lips. Do you think that I do not know? She was buried at Brighton where Gordon sleeps when I was a world away. And that sad old garden its secret keeps, for nobody knows today. She left me a message for me to read where the wild, wild oceans flow. Do you think that the heart of a man can bleed? Do you think that I do not know? They say I've never written of love. They say that my heart is such. The finer feelings are far above, but a writer may know too much. There are darkest depths in the brightest nights when the clustering stars hang low. There are things it would break his strong heart to write. Do you think that I do not know? Thank you.
Fluent sister, I had some words ready to write to you today, listening to Portishead's newest revelation. I was going to say how much I appreciated your reading, but to be probably franker than I ought to be if I desire your friendship. I don't care, in the case of female poets, about their feelings about their ex or present girlfriend or cheating boyfriend. How they get along with their mother is of no interest, or their jealousy over their sister's new baby, or even whether they are torn apart because their grandmother is dying of cancer. Let their boyfriend cheat. Let him infect them with syphilis picked up from some $2 Bangkok whore on his expedition to disperse tears and funds to earthquake victims in Burma. And as for men, I don't care whether they are bad at sex or overwhelmed by the need of their girlfriend to have her own career, or whether their mother ignored their existence from the day they are born is likewise of no interest, even though I have written such things myself. I have no particular interest in whether people are charming or interesting, even if they have charms such as yours. Nor do I care to observe the size of any relevant bulges, though I must admit I study the clothes they wear. To tell you the truth, I don't care whether poets are exposing their heart or even whether they actually have a heart at all, whether implicit or like some bad giant in a fairy tale, locked in an egg in a casket at the bottom of some deep forgotten well. The only goddamn thing that interests me is whether their poetry is good or bad. I was going to tell you all this, but unfortunately, while listening to Portishead, I forgot the words.